All right, so welcome to Well Talk. I am here with Dr. Zach, and I am just super excited to have him on here. He is tuning in all the way from Texas. So I'm in California, and Zach, you're in Texas.
Yo, what's up? Good old Texas. Good old Texas boy.
What's good? Born and raised, right?
Born and raised. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Super cool. And
Yeah.
thanks again for having you. Thanks for coming on here and taking the time to come on and just chop it up, man. I'm excited.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So if you can do me a favor and just kind of tell me a little bit about your background as a professional and what you've been working on. I know you have a private practice and
Yeah.
out there in Texas. So yeah, go ahead and share about you.
Yeah. So, I go by Zach. I do have a PhD in marriage and family therapy. I have 3 degrees from good old Texas Tech University. So,
Okay.
paid this university all of my money and will be forever indebted to them because they just took all my money. But got some fancy little letters after my name. I'm born and raised in Lubbock, Texas. And really passionate about the work I do, man. As a licensed marriage and family therapist, I love people. I love relationships. I mean, I just love the work that I get to do. It's quite the privilege. Um, and I really am convinced that my work as a professional began long before my training. Like
Mhm.
my life led me down this career path and down this avenue, and I'm just really grateful for the work I get to do. But so I'm a licensed family therapist. I work in private practice. In conjunction with that, I do some teaching on the side, and more recently secured a full-time faculty position. So I'll be starting that in the near future with Antioch University, where I'll be training future MFTs joining the field, and so
Sick.
hoping to leave an imprint on them and launch new professionals into the field to make meaningful impact in their corners of the world. So, yeah, love what I do.
So cool. I That's first of all the teaching, the therapy, the now you're going to be a supervisor as
Yeah.
well, and I think that's so cool because I know we don't know each other very well, but we do have an idea of what we stand for, what we're about,
Yeah.
and I can see how you would just be an awesome supervisor. Like if I was
Yeah.
a trainee or an intern, I'd be like, I want that person to be my clinical supervisor.
Dude,
So
the supervision process is such a fun one for me as a supervisee, but now developing supervisor, or I have the supervision credential now, but I think I grew most as a person and a therapist in the supervision process. Like,
mhm,
if there's anything therapists should know, it's to never freaking isolate. Even when you become fully licensed, stay in connection with people. Like, you
totally,
need to be in community with other therapists to be able to work through and think about conceptually what we're doing, and
yeah.
to just be able to have that support system, I think so important. But I love the supervision process. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. I
yeah,
think even looking back in my time as a community mental health therapist, I did like 3 years of that and out here, and
uh,
that was probably some of the toughest work I've done, but also some of the most rewarding. And I
yeah.
just learned so much. And so,
Yeah,
yeah.
we obviously chop it up via Instagram, but I actually had somebody reach out to me yesterday who on Instagram who's a therapist and they're working in community mental health, and they just said, I'm struggling. Like, do you
Oh,
have anything for me? I'm struggling and I don't want to do this.
yeah.
And being someone who's worked in a community agency as well, it is challenging to work with people who have high needs but low resources. But
Wow.
that
Yeah.
work as a professional is so important, and helps build our character, helps build our approach to treatment and what we believe about treatment. And I know that community mental health isn't for everyone, but I think it's so dang important in
Yeah.
our development as professionals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
Because I've had people ask me too about where did you get your hours and how did you get your hours done? And, I don't know, is it the same in Texas for 3,000 hours or?
Correct. Yep. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So
Yep.
3,000 hours,
Yep.
right? And I mean, that takes usually two and a half, three,
Yep.
depending on how you're doing it.
Yep.
But in community mental health, it's tough. And I know people have asked me as well, like, what do you recommend? And I say,
Yep.
if you can do it and you can make it work, try it out. It teaches you a lot. You
Yep.
learn how you really do get right in the crisis stuff.
Yep. Yep.
and, and after you kind of, if you stay in it, and I know like my previous supervisor has been in community mental health for, I want to say like 15 years plus, and she just continues to do it. If you stay in it, mad props to you.
Yep.
If
Yep.
you do it for the first, 2, 3, 4 years and get hours, huge learning experience.
Yeah, I mean, I know this can be a really a deep rabbit hole, but I think it's important for therapists to get this experience because it kind of humbles us,
Mm,
right? Like, I think sometimes therapists can get this savior complex, but it's like when you're coming up against clients who are in real crisis and don't have food on their table or have basic needs met,
right.
what do you do? What is your role as a therapist? And I think that really is just a critical opportunity to develop as a therapist and get you thinking about larger systemic issues
Yeah.
that impact the direct lives of our clients. And so, certainly for that work, I think it's important, and it's not for everyone, but I think it's important for therapists to have that experience. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And it does
Yeah.
bring in new insights, and you get a firsthand look on certain people's populations and the
Yep.
groups that, people are struggling and they're hurting,
Yep.
and
Yep.
we get to make a difference, which is
Yep.
so huge.
Yep. Yes,
And
sir.
and my question to you with that would kind of be going into, as you're a professional, as you teach, as you are a dad, all the things you do, what do you do to take care of yourself? How do you
Yeah.
self care? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Sure. It's certainly a practice, and what I mean by that is it's something that I have yet to master, and I don't think that I ever will. It's a practice, right? And practice means deliberately, intentionally doing things to ensure my well-being. And I think it's difficult to do, it's something that I have to continue to be reminded of. And I so there are many things I do, but yeah, there are also many things on my plate. So I'm a therapist, supervisor, an instructor, a professor, an educator, whatever you want to call it. I'm a husband, I'm a dad, I'm a son, all these other things. And
yeah,
it can be really, I mean, I run a dang Instagram. That's another job,
a very
right?
successful one, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which,
Like,
what's your tag? Because I want people
It,
to be able to follow you.
I believe it is Dr. Oh goodness. Dr. Dot Zach Trevino. So hit me up, follow me, whatever we call it nowadays. But so I do a lot of things, right? And it can be really easy to put myself on the back burner. Not only, yeah, many people struggle with this, therapists themselves struggle with this. But for me personally, it's certainly something I continue to recognize a need for in my life. So when I think about ways that I take care of myself, I certainly attend therapy. So I went to see my therapist yesterday.
Yeah.
I do a monthly check-in with my therapist. I don't think that therapists need to be in therapy forever. I don't want to imply that, but I think going to therapy and doing the work there is so important.
For sure.
But beyond that, it's doing things like, dude, I'm an old man, so like I like slow mornings. So I take my kid. I try to adjust my schedule where I can have a slow morning. So I have two kids. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And
Nice.
so after I drop my kids off, I try to schedule in time where I can just like recoup and recalibrate after that chaotic morning. So that it's simple things like that. Just scheduling a window of time where I can just breathe and go grab a coffee, go to my office, sit down, sit in some quiet. Like that's a very small, realistic way I take care of myself.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, kids, chaos. It's chaos and I love it. But
Yeah.
so I do things like that. I do things like making efforts to go to my garage and hop on my treadmill 3 times a week.
Hmm.
What other things? Being with my family, spending time with my kids, trying to get outside, except for the weather in Texas is 103 and dry heat. And so it's pretty hard in the summer. So we do like early morning play times on the outside and then evening times. But just, yeah, there are other things I do, but really just trying to be intentional about that process. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Intentionality with that. I think, I like what you said too about it being a practice.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I don't think we do ever master that. I agree
Yep.
with you. I think when you say, like, if somebody were to say they're a master of self care, I'd be like,
Yeah, you're lying, bro.
You're lying.
Yeah,
That's not true.
yeah, yeah.
I preach it though. I do talk about it a lot, and I think it's important because it's about growth and learning how to take care of
Mm,
yourself for sure.
yep.
But like you said, with the kids too, you got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. Dude, I have a soon to be 2-year-old in August. So I'm in that
Nice,
toddler
nice.
mode right now too.
Yeah,
And I hear
dude.
with the
When they
morning, man.
when they hit two, bro, it just takes off.
Oh
Like
my goodness.
just it just takes off. And yeah, the morning. I'm a dad and I love my kids, but I hate bedtime. I hate bedtime. And I also the mornings can just be really unpredictable. I don't know about hate bedtime, but I just like bedtime. It's a challenge with the 1-year-old and the 3-year-old.
Yeah. I can't. So you've got two, I've got one. And with one, it's, he's got his routine.
Yes.
And I usually do bath and then my wife does like the
Ah,
bedtime part.
yes. Yes.
So the bath sometimes it can be, it
Yep.
depends, right? Because he can
Yep.
go from 0 to 100 real quick. From
Hmm.
like, I'm
Hmm.
loving bath to like, no, get me out and all
Hmm.
of it.
Hmm.
But yeah, I
Hmm.
mean, give me some of your insight because yeah,
Dude, being a dad is the best thing I've ever done. It is the most
I
beautiful
agree.
thing I've ever
It
done.
is, yeah.
And it's also the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life. You can have all the textbook knowledge. You can know all the things about child development. You can know that you want to give your children a different experience than what you had as a child.
Yeah.
And no one can still prepare you for what it means to become a parent.
So
Right.
true. Yeah. It's
So
yeah.
when you have one kid, and I don't, it's challenging all around, but when you have one kid and it's you and your spouse, you can kind of tag team it, right? Like
Mhm.
take turns. When you have two kids, it's hard because one partner gets one kid and the other partner gets the other kid, right? So uh
That's what I've been thinking in for future. I'm like, which one am I going to get? Yeah, yeah.
and we have to rotate because now my 1-year-old is I have my 3-year-old is our little boy and my 1-year-old is our little girl and she's at a point where she can pick who she wants now and so we try to rotate every night who's laying with one and who's laying with the other.
Yeah.
But dude, being a dad is I so to be transparent, I started going back to therapy when I became a parent
Mm,
because it was just challenging. There were things that I was coming up against that I didn't know how to navigate tantrums. I didn't know how to navigate crying and screaming to infants,
yeah.
feeling out of control, not learning, I couldn't regulate myself and still struggled to do that. But I started therapy because I knew that I wanted to show up for my children, in a healthy way. And don't get me wrong, I struggle every single day. My wife will be the first to tell you yeah, he struggles. She'll be the first to tell you. We were in Target not long ago and they were screaming and throwing a tantrum and people were watching us and I
Yeah.
was overwhelmed and I was not helping the situation. And my wife said, go, go calm yourself down, take a walk. So, just having a partner who says, hey, get your crap together. You're not helping the kids. Go regulate, go breathe, go calm down, and then come back and help us. But
Yeah.
it's hard, dude. It's hard. And I mean, that I could say that all day. It's hard. Um, and again, in that same breath, it's really freaking beautiful.
It's so true. Yeah, it's so true. And I agree
Yeah.
with you so much there because the whole process of even learning, like, okay, I'm gonna be a dad and prepping and then thinking like, all right, then the whole, oh, okay, now I'm a dad, like the baby's here, like,
Mhm.
and when, especially when you're like in the hospital with your wife and you get that one day of like, oh, the hospital, the nurses help, and then eventually it's like you guys now are responsible
Yes.
for this life. And you're
Yes.
like, there's no times where you have like a pause
Yeah.
unless you
Yes.
get, yeah, your partner to support and can say like, hey, go
Yep.
ahead, I got this, and
Yep.
yeah,
It's hard too because, you things change so fast. So you get a hold of one thing and you feel like, okay, I got this. And then things change, right? Like,
yeah.
and they're developing and they're changing. So it's just,
That's so true too. Yeah.
yeah, like you get a grasp on like, okay, I got this. And then
Yeah.
something else is new and you're like, okay, how do I navigate this?
Yeah.
Right. My 3-year-old has recently been asking us about death. And it's like, how do you explain death to a 3-year-old? Um, but
Oh yeah.
nonetheless, it's me. Something I work on doing is just trying to be. I love this word here. Me and my therapist talk about it a lot, like being permeable. As a dad who wants to give my kids a healthy childhood, I think I can be very rigid and like there's a way to do this a healthy way.
Hmm.
It's actually like sure, and you have to be permeable and adaptable to your children's needs and being able to like recognize that just because you had one evening of chaotic bedtime doesn't mean the next night's going to be chaotic. So
It's
it it's hard.
it's the most unpredictable thing I've
Yes.
experienced. And you know
Yeah.
what's really crazy is
Yeah.
that I mean we both are therapists. I didn't even experience that working with clients where, because sometimes you could have those moments where you had no idea this is going, wow, we went into crisis mode like really quick. And with kids, you're like, whoa, dude, we just had an amazing,
Yep.
like, this moment and now we shifted. And yeah, and right now my son is in the, I'm gonna throw a tantrum if I don't get the water bottle that I picked from the one that is up in the cabinet that you can't find because, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
and
Yep.
then you
Yep.
give it to him, and then he's like, "No, but I don't want it anymore."
Yep. Yep.
And talk about emotional regulation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
It is a challenge, bro. And I think that many dads struggle with this. They just don't vocalize it because you're supposed to be the dad who has it together and who's put together and
yeah. So
and I think there are many dads who struggle with these things. We just don't vocalize the experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately, I think it comes along with some stigmas as well, and people saying, well, we don't talk about it, we got to be strong, we got to be tough, and I get that, right? We're
Yeah.
strong and tough, but at the same time it's important to know that we can be vulnerable and
Yeah.
open up and talk about what's going on.
Yeah.
And,
I think I think a challenge for me has been my wife has her own struggles, but she has a lot more patience than me. And
mm,
she's always dreamed of being a mother and she does a great job at it. And she has a lot more, her window of tolerance for just like the kids' chaos is bigger than mine. It's a larger window.
yeah, it's so true. Like I get the same thing with my wife. I'm like, this patience that you have is next level.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
so I think that sometimes early on, I found myself comparing myself of not wanting to vocalize that I'm struggling because I saw my wife doing it so well.
Mm.
But along the way, we've learned to just, yeah, like I mean, when I became a dad, I cried all the time because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I'm failing, or I don't know how to calm this kid down. I don't know what to do with him anymore. Right.
Yeah.
But so I think, yeah, I think many dads struggle with this, and I think it's important that we, yeah, continue to work to vocalize that. Like,
Yeah.
we don't talk about the hard parts of parenting. It's like we talk about parenting and becoming a dad and a parent in a way that's like rainbows and butterflies, and it's going to be so beautiful. And it is. It's life changing.
Yeah.
It's also really challenging. It is
It,
in ways that I can't describe. So,
no. Unless you are a dad and
yeah,
you've experienced it, it's hard to kind of put it into words. But once you
yeah,
get that put into words, it really, and you've experienced that, it becomes something where you're like, yeah, I get it. I mean, I've had times where I've literally walked past dads and they've got their kid or I've got mine, or we just see and you look and you make eye contact and you go,
yeah,
you know
yeah,
what I mean? Like,
yes,
one of those like, if you know, you
yeah,
know.
yes,
And
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
and I
yeah,
think yeah, the way we can help bring support is talking about it more and understanding that it's okay to bring up the hard parts because
yeah,
like you said, it is beautiful. It is something that I would never trade in. I
yeah,
would do anything for my son.
yep,
And yeah, it's also been one of the most difficult things that I've had to do because it's
yep,
just you're responsible for another life,
yep,
you know?
yeah. Yeah, I always tell my clients who are new parents, there's just like no handbook. There's not a rule book. There's
Yeah,
not a,
no.
but also millions and millions of people have done this before. So
Yeah.
it's we're not the only ones, right? But
Right. And we turned out okay, right?
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
yeah, and I agree. I think being able to be transparent is huge because when you can be open and say like, look, I don't have it mastered.
Yeah.
the parenting masterclass or things like that. I think it would be more important to have a transparency class of just look,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
know, like, we obviously know theory and we have ideas about things that can be applicable,
Yep.
but when when it comes to like just being human, sometimes we're just human beings, man.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
What are your so I mean, I'm curious, what are your thoughts about like, I don't know, being an involved I'm gonna assume you're like Hispanic, Latino.
Yeah.
What are
Yeah.
your what are your thoughts on, I don't know, just generational parent being a dad, like
Yeah.
generationally older dads versus modern day dads. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on those differences?
I think there's a huge difference. I
Mm,
think I was fortunate. My brother and I were fortunate to have my dad be in the home where he was open and really had an open door policy with us. My dad gave us what he never had, because his dad, he never knew his biological dad.
mm,
So he
mhm,
broke that cycle. And
mhm.
I think in his mind, this kind of goes way back, but he tells people, he was a 9-year-old kid saying, "I'm never gonna leave my kids."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
a 9-year-old just speaking
Yeah.
that out. And so the way he was brought up was definitely different, because there was, not the bio dad there in the picture and stuff. And but for the way my dad parented us, I've tried to use the same approach, but also, add some flavor to it from this new modern, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
thinking and stuff. But I think there's a gap too in being Latino and working with a lot of clients that come from even families where there's that machismo, and
Yep.
that
Mhm,
we don't
mhm,
talk about feelings, don't talk to me.
mhm.
I just do what I do and just that's it, you
Yep.
know?
Yep.
And so
Yeah, I
it's
think
hard.
there's a new generation of, or what am I trying to say here? There's a shift happening where I would like to believe that there's more fathers are being hands-on,
Yes.
involved,
Yeah.
engaged, and we're not leaving that up to the other parents,
Mhm.
the traditional gender role of mom doing everything. Like, I think we're seeing more men be dads and be parents and be fathers,
Yeah.
and being involved in that process. And I think that that's a really important thing for the development of children and for future generations, like future, yeah, just younger future generations.
Yeah.
Um, and it's encouraging to see. So my dad was the father who provided, and that was his role,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Mhm.
there was no emotional talk, very traditional type of dynamic, right? And his way of loving and extending love was to financially provide.
Yeah.
But I just I see more dads being more emotionally involved, more engaged in children's lives, and I think that that's really encouraging for me to see, is
Yeah.
men stepping up to the plate, but just naturally occupying that father role in a very healthy way, and it's encouraging for sure.
Definitely. And I
Yeah.
and I think that the more we start to change that norm, the
Mhm.
more people will see and say, like, even if you were raised a certain way, you can still change it up.
Yep.
You don't
Yep.
have to repeat that cycle as
Yep.
well.
Yep.
And
Yep.
yeah, so Matt, and props to you in that, where you're, being able to navigate through this and
Oh,
yet set that up for your kids.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
I like to talk about, there are things that we can take with us into our adulthood, and there are things we can leave behind, right? There are
Yeah.
things we can bring with us from our childhood and things that we can continue to nourish and cultivate. And there's also things that we can choose to leave behind that don't serve us, that didn't
Yeah.
help us as kids.
Yeah.
And we can, as adults, choose the things that we pass on, and the things we give to our kids. And that's beautiful, right? Because we have autonomy. We can do things different. We can choose different. We can choose health.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we do those things. Yeah.
Definitely. No,
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate that insight, because that's
Yeah.
really good too. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm curious too, like, even for listeners and people that maybe are starting out as a therapist, or they're seasoned vets and things like that, and or even with teaching as well, because you got a lot of hats on, which is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
And even
Yeah.
let me add this too. Instagram
Yeah.
And oh, you do because I love your page, man. It's
Thanks, man.
awesome. Yeah, like I remember when I first found it, and I was like, dude, this is cool.
It's funny, man. It's so funny because I hear people always saying like, "Man, you do so good with your Instagram," and it's
Yeah.
I'm gonna be real honest. Like, I don't feel creative. I don't feel creative. I don't feel like I don't sit down and like pull out a calendar and say I'm gonna schedule this content. I don't do that, dude. It's
Yeah.
just like for me, I think Instagram has been an outlet to just
Uh,
process external things, right? Like this morning I posted a reel, but it was I think you
oh,
liked it. Like it said like shout out to the short kings, and I was like, the
yeah.
reason that came to my mind was shouting out the men who are short and have insecurities about that. But the reason that came to my mind is because I was walking into a coffee shop this morning
Yeah.
and I saw some dudes that were short, and I was like, man, I'm a little bit taller than them, and I was comparing myself. But I also have insecurities about my height, so I just took that thought,
Yeah.
created a freaking reel. So I don't know, man. Instagram has been a fun outlet to bring awareness to normalize therapy and help seeking and that type of thing. But
Yeah.
I'm not a freaking expert there. I'm not a professional there. I do it to have fun. I do it to bring awareness, and it's worked.
I
It's
think
worked.
that, yeah. And I want to add, I think just you being authentic in what you do has
Yeah.
translated into on your page, and
Uh,
people see that, and it just
yeah.
works because,
Thanks.
for
Yeah.
example, there are people, yeah, that are rigid with their schedule and posting and all of that and things
Yeah.
like that. And what works for you, it's obviously working, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that resonated with me too, because I was like, man, shout out to, yeah, because I'm like five, let's say 5'8", maybe 5'7",
Yeah. I'm
So
5'7". So
okay, yeah. I mean, I try to say 5'8", but more 5'7". And
yeah.
so when I see all of my friends growing up were just tall. Like I hung out with a lot of basketball players and stuff, and so they were all like six something,
Yep. Yep.
and I was just, cool,
Yeah.
like yes,
Dude, I can't tell you the amount of men I've worked with who we've somehow talked about like, maybe confidence or issues things you don't like about yourself. And height has come up many times.
yeah,
Many, like realistically, that's an insecurity that many men hold that
yeah,
we don't vocalize because there's this idea that you have to be a certain height to be, to look a certain way and to
right,
be all those
yeah.
things. And my wife is about my height as well because I think she's 5'8", I'm 5'7". But
Oh, yeah,
anyways,
yeah,
it is what it is. But yeah, I do love Instagram, and it's a fun outlet to be able to bring awareness, provide education, but also have fun with it and just normalize. We're human, we struggle, we suffer, and that's okay,
yeah,
And so Instagram has been just a really fun outlet, and an opportunity to connect with therapists across the country and across the world, really.
right,
That's
yeah,
been really beneficial too. So,
yeah. It was
uh,
cool. Yeah,
uh,
definitely. And
uh,
I mean, just going into your experience and what you've been doing. First of all, congrats too on what we talked about earlier with the
mm,
clinical hours, everything, and just you know,
thanks, man. Yeah.
So I want to give you a shout out for that and
Uh,
props to all that you're doing. I want to ask too, like, because I want to be respectful of your time. Do you have any remarks that you'd like to just give people some advice, even
um,
as a therapist, as a dad, from
mm,
any anything that comes to mind, like,
uh,
yeah,
yeah, I think this is applicable to therapists, but to people as well, just to humans.
yeah,
I, you know, being a human is hard. And you probably have heard me say being a dad is hard, but being a human is hard.
yeah,
We all have our own lived experiences. We all have our own stories. We all have our own pain. Yesterday, when I was in a session with a client, I asked them, what's the purpose of pain? I literally just said, what's the purpose of it? Like, why do we experience pain?
mhm,
Um, and so just going to throw that out there, but we're human. We all suffer. And I think that that's the common thread across humanity is that we in our own ways have experienced pain and loss, heartbreak, all the other things.
yeah,
And I think that makes us human. And so I think what I'm trying to get at here is my hopes would be that people recognize to never stop growing, like to adopt a teachable mindset, to adopt a growth mindset,
yeah,
to recognize that growth is never ending, right? Like we never reach the finish line of this work.
Mhm.
It's a becoming process, but it's also an unbecoming of what we thought we were supposed to be. But my hopes would be that you take the risk to do the work, you take the risk to become introspective about your life and your internal landscape and your internal world. And you do that in a way that allows you to then decide, what do I do with this?
Mhm.
I can't change where I come from. I can't change what I've been through.
Yeah.
But my autonomy as an adult gives me the freedom to decide, what do I do in response to this?
Yeah.
To be human is to experience some kind of suffering, and change and loss travel together. It's clear here. I see so many clients, and it's clear that, when they experience change, they're often experiencing some sort of loss,
Yeah.
loss of identity, loss of relationship, loss of a family member, loss of a job, many things. But to be human is to experience and endure some suffering. And I'm not saying that it's all suffering, but
Yeah.
we all as humans struggle and suffer, and that's okay. So
Yeah.
my hopes would be just to recognize it's okay to suffer, it's okay to hurt, and it's also okay to ask for help. And you're not weak for asking for help.
No.
You're not less than, you're not unworthy for asking for help.
Yeah.
In fact, it's really courageous and brave to do so. And so, yeah, I could go on and on here, but I love the work I get to do.
Yeah. No,
So,
that's such a great insight because I agree to with everything and even saying that, we're human, we feel. I've often said too, like to not feel is to not live. Like if you
yeah,
don't feel, you're not living. And it's okay.
yeah,
It's okay to feel. It's okay to
yeah,
address the emotions. And when you brought that up right now too, of talking about it or being courageous to speak up about it
yeah,
is so difficult, but such a rewarding thing.
yeah. I think that there are, I think there are many people, and I include myself here, but I think there are many people surviving and not living.
That's good.
Is that we, in our experiences of loss and pain, have had to adapt and survive
Yeah.
in many different ways. And I think sometimes when we're in a survival state, we're not actually living. And I think living is a very subjective experience, that the way in which you live is different than the way in which I live.
Yep.
But my hopes in the work I get to do is to help people step out of that survival mode, to get back into the driver's seat of their lives and to begin living and
I love
choosing for themselves, and nourishing and cultivating the things that bring them life, and that allow them to live. But doing the work isn't easy, and I also want to recognize that too. Like,
it's true.
it's scary to ask for help, and doing the work isn't easy.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think it'd be easier if we there are people out there who haven't done the work, and I think that they're oblivious to some of the things they're dealing with, and the behaviors. When you do the work, you have an awareness and can decide to do the healthier thing. So
Yeah.
the work is not always easy. It's not
Right.
always easy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Um,
think that part too is super important. It's the work's not always easy. It's a process.
yep.
And you mentioned fixed mindset and growth mindset as well.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
growth mindset perspective is really what makes that difference because you
Yeah.
can be subjective in your fixed mindset.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and
Yes.
growing is huge. And that's why in a lot of what I talk about, I emphasize the mind stance of being able to adapt and adjust.
Mm,
It's similar to what growth mindset is
mm,
with a highlight on, like you said, adaptability and being able to pivot. And I think
yeah.
it's huge. It's
I love that word, being able to pivot, right? Like,
yeah,
being permeable, adaptable, like, yeah, that's life. Like,
that's it.
even if we do the work, there's still going to be struggles and challenges. It's a matter of it's our relationship with those struggles that
Yes.
we have control over, right? And but nonetheless, to be human is a difficult experience, but it's also a really beautiful one. And I really
Yeah.
believe in the process of growth. I believe in the process of healing. And healing is a subjective experience. The way in which I believe healing occurs is different than how you heal, but
Mhm.
healing is possible, it's real, and it's in us. We got
Yeah.
to find it. We can tap into it, we can uncover it. And that's what I do as a therapist day in and day out, is help people tap into their inherent resources, their internal strengths, their internal courage. And it's quite the friggin' privilege to do so. And I don't take it lightly. I don't take it lightly, man.
Right.
I love the work I get to do, and respect to those who are in the arena doing the work as well in your respective corners of the world. I think mental health professionals are overlooked.
Yeah,
Um,
just a little bit.
but the work we do is important, and
Yeah.
I just really value it. So,
Yeah. And I
uh,
appreciate that too, because I think one thing that happens is sometimes we don't get to see the full manifestation of somebody's healing.
mhm,
And we
mhm,
and we I mean, I've had clients come in that I've only met with once that just did one thing and then I never saw
yeah,
them again because that's
yep,
what they needed, right? And
yep,
some people might say, well, they stopped because you were bad. And I'm like,
yep,
no, they needed closure with something, or some, and we never see them again.
yep,
But we know like you're making a difference. So I want to encourage other therapists out there as well.
yep,
Sometimes you don't see that full recovery or that
yep,
full healing,
yep.
but just know you invested something into somebody's life.
Yeah, sometimes it's just planting those seeds, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just planting those seeds, and we're not going to be the we're not going to be we can't be all things for all people.
Yeah.
Like
It's
we
so true.
can't. We
So
can't.
true.
I
Yeah.
mean, it would be wild of us to think that we're the solution to people's problems, right? Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like I can help, I can support, and I don't know what you need. I mean, I know, but
Yeah.
your journey is different than mine, and I'm going to help you uncover your journey and walk it in a way that's consistent and congruent with you and your life and what you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, I love therapy. I'm a believer in it
Yeah.
wholeheartedly. I love
Likewise.
therapy, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So I I feel echo the same sentiments that you do, and I appreciate you sharing what you've shared. Dude,
yeah,
I'd love to eventually have you come back and chop it up again. And
dude. I'm
yeah,
down, and maybe one day I'll have a podcast and have you on.
hey, it's
I throw
coming.
that out there just to manifest it, right?
I'm speaking it out, man. You're gonna
Yeah,
do it,
yeah,
and yes, it would be awesome to go on and collaborate with you. But
yeah.
props to you and all you're doing,
Thanks, man.
and just keep doing it, man. You're making a
Thanks,
huge
man.
difference. I appreciate you. I respect you, and again, your Instagram tag so people can follow you.
Yeah, so at Dr. Zach Trevino, ZACHTREVINO.
Nice.
Um, and yeah, so check out the Instagram, go get some laughs. I
Yeah,
do post some pretty funny crap, and hopefully entertain you a little bit.
yeah, it's great. It's great.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
go follow Zach, and Zach again. Thanks for coming on here. Appreciate
Of
you,
course,
man.
man.